And in 1945, OSS was disbanded. The CIA was one of the creations. U.S. Special Operations Command, as it's now known, was the other. And then the Bureau of Intelligence Research, INR, or our predecessor, was kind of the third entity. And President Truman, I think, recognized the value of keeping an intelligence function in the State Department to make sure that we could provide diplomats with the latest information they need to help inform foreign policy choices and decisions. And for 77 years, that's what INR has done. We've relied on really deep expertise on the issues to provide strategic assessments to support our diplomats both at home and abroad. You are right. Now, today, we are both a bureau in the State Department and one of the 18 intelligence agencies. And that means I have the benefit of and the advantage of reporting jointly to the Secretary of State and to the DNI. But we take our priorities, similar to other agencies. First and foremost, the National Intelligence Priority Framework, which is established for the entire intelligence community.
Can I interrupt you on that?
Yeah, please.
Is that something that you contribute to, or does the state have its own intelligence priorities, or you're subsumed under the broader executive branch's approach to the overall intelligence priorities? How does that sort out?
We have our own internal management priorities, but when it comes to the strategic issues that we will provide assessments on or support our policymakers on, those are all derived from the National Intelligence Priority Framework, which is established, by the DNI to serve the entire, executive branch. But we also then take into consideration, in terms of forming our own priorities, the national security strategy of the administration, and then the priorities of the Secretary of State. So in this case, Secretary Blinken's modernization agenda, those are really the three key inputs that allow us to determine what are we going to focus on substantively, and then what are we going to focus on from a business perspective in terms of driving management reforms in the Bureau.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned oversight. Is oversight undertaken by Congress through the Foreign Relations Committees, or do you also have a sort of dotted line to the intelligence committees on the Hill?
Yeah, so I have the pleasure of being overseen by both our Foreign Relations and our intelligence committees. Okay. And it has been, we've had really great interactions and engagements with both of those, and they have both of the committees and are very kind of focused on intelligence issues and the role that INR plays both in supporting the department and in supporting the intelligence community.
Okay. Yeah. And then one more sort of personal question before we dig into 702. How'd you wind up heading this fabulous bureau? And you obviously had a rich background in intelligence, et cetera, but is this something you had aspired to, sort of came a bit serendipitously or whatever? And then maybe if you could share a little bit about what was it like to walk into this bureau where the prior administration, without making a political point, had a very different approach to things, and you're obviously having a different agenda, different approach, different management style from the prior administration. Any light you want to shed on that? Sure.
So I had, in my career, when I was at CIA, I had worked very closely with INR substantively as an analyst, and then as a policymaker at the White House, I was the consumer of reports that INR would publish and engaged frequently with INR. And I always had a tremendous amount of respect for their expertise on the issues and for the people who work there. And but I never imagined I'd have an opportunity to lead what is truly a historic, kind of iconic institution, right? But when I received the call in early of 2021, asking if I would be interested, it was probably the easiest career decision I've ever made. The ability to work on the most interesting issues in the world. Secondly, for me, I've returned to my roots in the intelligence community. I started in the IC, and so after many years later, I now have an opportunity to go back. And then finally, the people, both in INR with whom I'd worked previously, but also to serve with and for DNI Haynes and Secretary Blinken, two people for whom I have always had a tremendous amount of personal and professional respect. It was an easy decision to say, yes, I will proceed with being considered for the role.
And when you walked in, what did you find?
I walked in, after a took me a little while to get confirmed. It wasn't until September of 21. There were some delays on the Hill, but nevertheless, I was excited to be confirmed in September. And look, we were still in the midst of COVID, and but to my surprise, I found, an institution in INR that had largely survived, mostly unscathed of some of the other, I think, impacts that other bureaus in the department suffered over the last 4 years. And but having said that, I mean, in the midst of COVID, plus just the hangover of some of the experiences of the prior 4 years, we had a need to, I think, revitalize some of the processes that are so important to making good intelligence and supporting
Have you increased
policy.
staff, or at the same level?
We've increased staff a little bit, and I think the main things we've done is really tried to focus on. This is a message that Secretary Blinken has, kind of implored upon all of his senior team, which is think about ways that you can leave the department a little bit better than when you found it. And so I've chosen to invest a lot of our time internally on building on a really strong institution in INR, but that includes modernizing how we do intelligence support to diplomacy. We've rolled out new product lines. We've got a new product daily brief for the Secretary of State that's in his book every morning. And then investing in our digital transformation, investing in cybersecurity, and investing in our people, both to increase the diversity of the type of people and the backgrounds that we're recruiting, but also the experiences they've had and the expertise they have. And so I think it's been a really fun part of the job, is helping to make a really extraordinary bureau even better.
You said your bureau gets finished reports from, let's just say, NSA on Section 702, but derived from Section 702. Do you enrich that yourself with your own diplomatic sources? Because obviously there's both, not only obviously the covert piece, but there's a pure overt collection, because diplomats around the world have as their function the collection of information in a very beneficial way, not surreptitiously, whatever, but they're reporting back to Washington. That is a function of one of our embassies. So how does that information that is coming in from all these embassies get into your bureau and get synthesized with the classified piece that's coming from 702? How do you package that and get that out to policymakers?
Sure. So INR is one of the 3 all-source analysis agencies in the intelligence community, along with CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency. And so what that means is we are reviewing all sources of information. So 702 information, imagery, human intelligence, diplomatic reporting, open sources, a lot of open sources increasingly. And we're synthesizing that, and our analysts are poring over all of that data to make conclusions about what's happening in the world, what opportunities there may be, what risks there are for the United States. And they're packaging that into a formal intelligence product, some of our products go into the President's daily brief. So they're included not only in the Secretary's book every morning, but the President's book every morning. Some of them are bespoke analytic products that we create just for the Secretary. So for instance, he's overseas right now. Before he's departing on a foreign trip, we will do tailored products that provide him background in the countries he's visiting, people he's meeting with, issues that may come up, et cetera. So we'll provide things that are just for him. He's our President and Secretary are top 2 clients.
Right.
So he's got his own little tailored intel service here. But then also we will use 702 information, as I said in the remarks, for beyond the analytics side of things. Diplomats overseas may come in with a request to say, look, we saw this in finished NSA reporting. Be very helpful if we could try to get that information downgraded to demarche a particular country over a policy difference we have, or an egregious violation of some human rights that we need to stand up for. INR will work with our diplomats, will work with our policy clients in the State Department to facilitate, through the appropriate channels with the intelligence community, requests to downgrade, or in some cases to declassify 702 information to support a diplomatic engagement.
So in addition to this process of enriching information itself, do you also serve as a little bit of a coordinator switchboard for the department, or traffic cop for information coming from embassy? So it's entirely possible that an embassy may get a direct report from NSA directly, and if they want to do an unmasking to find out more information about let us say, a U.S. person who's named there, who's a target of a foreign operation or whatever. Is that a request that would come through you? Could they go directly? How do you get involved in knowing what other recipients of information are doing? Is there some coordination function or whatever?
In INR, we have an office whose the policy sharing and coordination office, whose sole purpose is to be a service provider for the rest of the department to facilitate requests with, in this case, NSA for 702 information, to downgrade or to declassify that reporting so that diplomats can use it. So in that case, if there's something that comes in, there's a formal process they go through. There's a form they have to fill out. There has to be valid need to know. It's got to be reviewed and approved. Then it goes to the intelligence community. It goes to the NSA. They're the ones ultimately have to make the decision about risk to sources and methods.
Right.
They either approve it as written, or they'll oftentimes come back with modifications to say, yes, but only with these significant edits to your text, so it doesn't reveal sourcing. And then we will provide that back to our diplomatic customers, if you will, so that they can use it in their engagement. And that's hundreds of times a year
Right.
we facilitate those requests.
And if one of the embassies said, we'd like to get more intelligence on a particular point that's relevant to our host country and learn more about it, would that request come to you, and then you could present that to the IC to learn more information, or?
Sure. And oftentimes that is what.
So that might lead to targeting decisions by NSA at some point down the road. So
it could. Usually, it depends on the urgency of the matter, and if it's a really urgent issue, yes, we will. That will come in through us. We will help address those what they call collection requirements with the reporting agency. If it's 702 information, we'll help address that with NSA. Or if it's more kind of general, strategic in nature, hey, we'd really like to know more about these topics in the future. It's helping to support.
Right.
A public diplomacy effort that we're doing in the field, we'll feed that into the National Intelligence Priority Framework, that overall kind of intelligence collection process that you mentioned up front.
Right. The department, yeah.
It is a similar process. Again, if there are requests from the field to share that information, it will go through us. We will help facilitate the request, get it downgraded, declassified. But I'd say one of the ways, at least in INR, that we will regularly use 702 information and share with partners and allies, even if our partners and allies don't always know that that information is derived from 702, is through analytic exchanges that we have with a range of foreign partners in support of intelligence diplomacy. There are a number of engagements that I've had over the last year with our European Union counterparts on Russia and Ukraine and PRC issues, et cetera, that some of the kind of talking points and substantive analysis is derived from some of that 702 reporting. That's useful because it gives our partners and allies an opportunity to respond to our own assessments,
Right.
to help us identify blind spots in our analysis, understand what they're worried about, what they're not. So it's very useful. Downgrading, declassifying in general is useful.
Sure.
702 is a big part of that. In terms of the work that we do.
I imagine some of that must have been very relevant during the beginning of and during the course of the Ukraine conflict. Can you go into a little more detail about the unmasking process? What % of the time and under what circumstances are Americans' information unmasked, and is there any revelation of Americans involved in illegal activity abroad?
Look, I can speak for how the unmasking process works in INR and the State Department, and the overall numbers provided for the government are in the DNI's annual statistical transparency report. But for INR and the State Department, again, if there is an analyst comes across a piece of disseminated reporting that references a U.S. person, a U.S. entity generally, and they believe that they, as that expert, need to understand, basically to unmask that identity to help either inform their analysis of a particular situation, or if it's some sort of threat scenario, whether it's a cyber threat, physical threat, espionage, et cetera, they will submit a request that's documented, goes through a process internally, multiple levels within INR. Ultimately, either myself or another senior individual are the ones that ultimately say, yes or no, that can go forward to the collection agency to seek the unmasking. And then that agency ultimately makes the decision. It's either they believe it's a valid purpose that is necessary for, in this case, INR, the State Department, to perform and execute its duties, or they say no, and we get a denial of a response. But it is all well documented, and there have been a number of requests that I don't reprove. But fortunately, overall it's a small percentage, because our analysts recognize that it's an extremely sensitive matter to seek these unmasking requests.